What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of The Headlines for this week in gaming. What The Headlines is a gaming news video series where I cover headlines that have popped up in the gaming industry over the last week. I won't cover every title because there's plenty of outlets to do that. However, or every news story. However, I will cover some, and some weeks there may be more than others, like this week. Today, we got a bunch of stories that have popped up, a lot of headlines, so we're not even going to hesitate. Let's go. So this first headline comes to us from VGC, posted by Tom Ivan. Former PlayStation boss views Apple and Amazon as big threats to the games industry. Sean Layden says companies like Google and Netflix are also seeking to disrupt the sector. Former PlayStation executive Sean Layden has suggested that big tech companies that are non-endemic to the games industry pose one of the biggest threats to the business in its current form. Speaking at the GamesIndustry.biz Investment Summit, Layden labeled the likes of Google, Netflix, Amazon, and Apple as barbarians at the gate. Quote, "Right now we see all the big players going, oh, gaming. It's bringing in billions of dollars a year. I want a piece of that." And so we have Google, Netflix, Apple, and Amazon wanting to get a piece and trying to disrupt our industry, he said. He later goes on to say, quote, "I'm hoping gaming will be the first industry where we disrupt ourselves," he continued, "where it doesn't take a Google or an Amazon to completely flip the table. We should be smart enough to see these changes coming and prepare ourselves for that eventuality." Now, I have always thought something like this, because when you look at the consumer base of the gaming industry, it has just intensified over the years. And I mean, when you consider like what happened to the whole industry during COVID, now sure, a lot of development may have slowed down, but what did happen? There were a lot of streamers and there were a lot of people playing games on those streams. In addition to that, developers understood that they could work from home and they could also do VTCs. They could still connect across the globe and still get things done and impact the industry in a whole new way. So I would venture to say that what you tend to see is, well, what I tend to see is that with this increase of technology, with this increase of connectivity without having to be face to face, what it allows is for more development, more growth. With advancements in technology, it allows for more development, more growth. So then when you have traditional companies that are pushing out games in a particular manner, these other companies that are based off streaming, are based off of remote access types of things, they approach it from a whole different angle. So what does that do? Well, to me, if I'm an indie developer, if I'm an indie studio, I might go to Netflix. I might go to Apple, Amazon. Shoot, I might go to all three of them, all four of them. How can I get my game on your platform? I mean, we saw that with movies. We saw that with shows. One example I can think of is The Terminal List. Instead of making it a movie, they made it a show directly to Amazon, directly to the consumer, instead of having to wait for it to come out to theaters, get broadcast onto television. So I just think that, like, you could kind of see that this was happening. However, how much of an impact is it going to have? You know, I mean, because like when you look at Game Pass, for example, Xbox already has Game Pass. So if Netflix offered the same thing, same games, like how are you being different? How are you doing anything that would make me as a consumer say, hey, I think I'm gonna go over there? Now, if it's bundled to where I got my movies, I got games I can access, and all I gotta do is plug in my controller, sounds like a fair deal to me. Sounds pretty good to me. And then if there's indie studios that do a day one release, now you've given me an opportunity to say, you know what? I might actually check this out. So if I am a Netflix, if I am an Amazon, hey, you get access to these movies. Boom, you get access to the gaming. But oh, by the way, you also get access to day one releases that you can't get anywhere else. Maybe you can. You know, the funny thing, I used to remember Amazon when I would go on Amazon to see what new releases were coming out in terms of music. I feel like if Amazon does something similar, and if it was me, I would target the indie community. How can I get this indie game on there before everybody else? I want exclusive access first 30 days. Boom. Too easy. And then everybody else gets it, right? So I'm not like, they were selling music just like everybody else, but they had the release dates right then and there. So I think there's a way to do it, and it'll be very interesting how it shapes the landscape going forward. Next story is from IGN, from Taylor Lyles. Todd Howard teases potential reveal and details for Bethesda's Indiana Jones game. In an interview with Esquire, Howard did not share much in regards to the upcoming game, but teased that he could have more to share down the road. Quote, Howard would talk more about Indiana Jones. I can tell he really wants to, but he's not allowed, the article reads. Quote, instead, as I exit his office, he flashes that smile. We'll talk next year. For me, initially when I heard they might do an Indiana Jones game, the first thing I thought was, who wants that? Who is going to play that? And then I started listening to a few podcasts, and they're talking about, well, it might sound like an Uncharted type game. Like, how are they going to do things different? And then I started really thinking about it. And I was like, there is potential here. If I was a developer, I would come from the angle, like, let's look at, I think one of the good movies in the series was Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skulls, right? And the reason I think that was good was because it followed the same trail of, archaeology, archaeological finds from old societies and different environments. But then it took a spin on, it's actually technology from an ancient civilization that was not from this world, right? And then a spaceship takes off. So to me, that's like a whole conspiracy type thing, right? Like, why not play on that angle? I mean, you fill the archaeological treasure hunter aspect, but you also have this conspiracy type stuff. I think that would be a great fit. In terms of play style, I think it's going to be a lot of puzzles. I think it's going to be a lot of puzzle-based type stuff. I kind of liken it to a cross between Uncharted and probably Tomb Raider, if I had to guess. But Indiana Jones can have his own stories. There were comics about him. I'm pretty sure there were books. You had the movies. I think at one point there was a TV show. I don't know if there was ever a cartoon. But there's a whole universe there that doesn't have to fit the treasure hunter Uncharted blueprint. There's a whole landscape that can be explored, pun intended. And I think that interests me. It really does. It really interests me on how they can attack that and approach it. So more to follow. Like he said, we'll see this next year. I wouldn't be surprised if we see something at the Game Awards coming up this next year. Next story we got coming up is from Games Radar. Starfield surpasses 1 million concurrent players on launch day. This is by Haran Cryer. I apologize if I'm saying it wrong. Starfield has surpassed 1 million concurrent players across all platforms. Xbox head of gaming Phil Spencer announced the concurrent player milestone for Starfield yesterday on September 6th would just happen to be the same day Starfield launched in full. Bethesda's new RPG has been in early access since last week on September 1st, but yesterday finally saw its full launch and with it the 1 million players milestone. Starfield, Phil Spencer tweeted, Starfield exceeds 1 million concurrent players across all platforms today. Thanks to all the players who helped us reach this great milestone, and congrats to the Bethesda Studios. Later in the article, it goes on to say, it'll be interesting to see if Starfield's concurrent player count can climb above this 1 million benchmark. I can definitely see new players getting in on the game as strong word of mouth surrounding the game continues to spread, even after some stellar reviews last week, including our very own Starfield review. And that's from Games Radar. I attempted to play it, and what I realized is I need to get, which I thought my computer had, I guess it doesn't, I need to get an SSD card so I can play this game. But from what I was able to kind of experience, yeah, like I went in all fairness, I went into this, I didn't read a lot of reviews, but I definitely watched my share of reviews from, I would say, prominent and credible reviewers, as well as listen to a lot of podcasts in regards to each person's experience. And for me, it was something that I knew I wanted to experience. I think I have a very deep-rooted love for space games, but I don't play every space game, if that makes sense. So I wanted to be able to experience this, and then to hear how you can go off on these long side quests, and it's a whole different story. You can do tons of exploration and do ship building and base building. You can actually get through the main story and then jump into new game, and then it expands even more, and then you play new game plus and it expands even more. So to me, it validates what my want was, which is to experience this game for myself. I think that it is definitely going to be a potential contender for Game of the Year, right alongside Baldur's Gate 3. But we're not done with the year yet, so it'll be interesting to see what else shakes out. But I think that it definitely has made an imprint from what I've seen and listened to and gathered from the game industry as a whole. It's definitely made an imprint, and I think each person probably should experience it in their own right. So hopefully I will. Stay tuned to the channel and the videos, so I'll let you know. This next story is from IGN. This is from Logan Plant. Skull and Bones has lost its third creative director. Skull and Bones is suffering yet another breach in the hull as Ubisoft's long-delayed pirate game has lost another creative director. According to a report from Kotaku, creative director Elizabeth Pellin left Ubisoft Singapore to return to Ubisoft Paris headquarters earlier this summer. Pellin had been working on Skull and Bones since 2018. This marks the third time Skull and Bones has lost a creative director. Kotaku's report also says Ubisoft Singapore is facing an organized labor campaign from Singapore's Creative Media and Publishing Union. Quote, 5 years ago, Elizabeth Pellin went to Ubisoft Singapore with the mission to reboot the creative direction of Skull and Bones. An Ubisoft spokesperson told Kotaku. Quote, she succeeded and the Skull and Bones team is now fulfilling her vision to deliver a unique naval action RPG experience to our players. What it sounds like is she went there to spearhead the project, get it on track, get it in a new creative direction, probably based off a lot of the feedback from the initial play testing and beta testing, because I think they've done like 3 or 4 beta tests at this point. And the team now is getting back to work to realize that vision. For me, I wanted to play this. For somebody that didn't experience Assassin's Creed, Black Flag in the way that everybody else did, when I saw this, I knew that this was an opportunity to jump into a pirate game that could fill that void. When I first saw, I can't remember what game convention it was, when they announced the trailer, they showed some gameplay, and they kind of showed that it was, you know, you're on your ship primarily. It's only naval battles, you know, that you're experiencing. You have some small ports that are pretty much confined. There's no open exploration. To me, it just really felt like they missed the mark on that for me, because for me, I wanted to be able to experience navigating the open seas, going to different ports, exploring, doing different quests, you know, customizing my character. I wanted to be able to experience that, and the naval battle aspect is a huge part of it, but it shouldn't be, in my mind, the only aspect. So it'll be interesting to see what actually comes out of it. I would venture to say they're probably going to gear up something for Game Awards. I think they want to reboot, refresh, push it back out, let people know, hey, it's still coming, expect it. But with this creative director leaving, We don't know when it says lost another creative director. We don't know. I mean, what does that mean? I mean, further in the article, I'm kind of looking and I don't really see anything in there that says that she or that they left for any negative reason. It just really says that, you know, in that quote, she succeeded and the Skull and Bones team is now fulfilling her vision to deliver a unique naval action RPG experience to our players. Now look at that quote right there. A unique naval action RPG, a role-playing game. If it's only on a ship, then I think that's where it runs into problems. If there is some open exploration at these ports, interacting with characters, going on quests, customizing your ship, then I think you have a moneymaker, no doubt. I think there will be I think they wanted two aspects of this. I think they wanted, my nose is so itchy, I apologize. I think they wanted a huge multiplayer aspect of it, so people keep playing it, kind of similar to Sea of Thieves, but not in that artistic vision. But I think they also wanted those people that they wanted the user base that likes that solo gameplay, you know, that exploration gameplay, which that's why I wanted to play it. When I saw it, I absolutely wanted to dive in on that. So that quote right there gives me hope. We'll see. I'd like to hopefully see that they push a trailer out. But of course, Ubisoft does do the Ubisoft Forward. So they may not push anything around that time frame. Maybe it'll be early, maybe it'll be later. We'll just have to wait and see. If I'm not mistaken, there was another beta that just released in August. So it'll be interesting to see what else comes out. This next story is from Games Radar. This is another one from Hiren Cryer. Again, I apologize if I'm butchering the name. Nintendo is reportedly showing Switch 2 to developers with a souped-up version of Breath of the Wild. The Nintendo Switch successor was reportedly shown to developers behind closed doors last month. Eurogamer reports that Nintendo was present at Gamescom 2023 to quietly show off the, quote, Switch 2 to certain developers. Later in the article, it says, apparently this included a souped-up version of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, the 2017 launch title for the Nintendo Switch. However, Eurogamer makes sure to mention that this was purely a tech demo for developers behind closed doors, meaning there's no indication Breath of the Wild will see a public re-release for the Switch's successor. This is how I've started to look at gaming news. Whenever there's a rumor about something or speculation, something is said speculatively, I feel like there is some truth to that. And not everything, because there's so much stuff that goes on in the games industry. It's very hard to tell what is fact from fiction, right? But when you have these very big game conventions that take place, there still is the aspect of what happens behind closed doors can lend itself to how the future could be shaped. So if there is this rumor that is going around, it is safe to say that the Switch 2 is going to come soon. Well, it's going to come. We'll say that. It's going to be, pushed out at some point. Is that going to be next year? Is that going to be in 2025? I think if you look at the slate of games that are being released, that could potentially tell you when it might come out. I think if you see big, like a big title in the near future, 2024, 2025, probably announced at Gamescom, then, because I don't know if there's any other big conventions unless Nintendo does a Nintendo Direct soon. If you see or something announced, that could potentially be a launch title for this. Now, it could launch on its own, of course, but I mean, there's been a slew of decently sized titles. The new Legend of Zelda, Super Mario Wonders, the Super Mario RPG, Untitled Peach game. Pretty sure there's a Kirby game in there somewhere. Those are pretty big titles for Nintendo. So if they're pushing this slate of games out over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, then by the time we get to games, or by the time we get to Game Awards next year, could we have a release date if it hasn't already been announced? We'll see. But I think this was on the horizon. When you look at the titles that are being released, gives you an idea of what to expect in the future. So hopefully it's within the next year, maybe in the next 2 years. I mean, it gives these games that are coming out some time to breathe on this current system, and it allows the next slate of games to be announced so people can gear up for that next piece of hardware to experience those games. Now, if it has backwards compatibility, then you're in the money, because a game that was just pushed out a year or two ago, you can still play on this next console. So, we'll see. Our next story comes to us from VGC. This is by Chris Sculion. Yakuza creator Nagoshi says that there's a high possibility his next game will use Western actors. Given its setting, the Yakuza series, now known as Like a Dragon globally, has almost entirely Japanese cast in each game. However, Nagoshi, who is currently leading development on his as yet unannounced next game at his new company, Nagoshi Studio, says his current project may have a more international cast. In a recent interview with VGC, we asked Nagoshi if the casting process was considered right at the start of the development, or if the game's mechanics are fleshed out first before casting begins. Nagoshi said it was the latter, and that casting had only really just started for his latest game. Quote, "At this point, we're mostly focusing on trying to improve the core gameplay. So we are still at the early stage of selecting actors," he replied. Quote, "But it's definitely the plan because I want to create something cinematic. And I want to use the fame and popularity of actors to make my game known by more people." What I hear from this is a movie. I hear the potential for a movie. And if not a movie, something that is very cinematic and big. Because I think the franchise is just continued to grow and blossom and do its thing over the last however many years. I think in recent years, to me, it feels like it's just gotten bigger as a title and as a franchise. And I think it would only make sense to eventually get to a point where you can gear up to potentially do a movie that is a crossover that expands the consumer base and dives into a whole new universe. I think it's great. I would love to see it. I'm looking forward to the new games. I know I played some of the Yakuzas back in the day. It's been a while since I've dived back in, but every trailer I see for every new game, I'm like, man, I gotta go back and play Like a Dragon. Man, I gotta go play Ishin. I gotta keep going in. So looking forward to this to see what happens. I feel like a lot of these announcements that are coming out are really shaping up towards some types of reveals and some type of announcements at the Game Awards here in the next few months. And because that's the end of the year event where, like Jeff Keighley said, trailer after trailer after trailer after trailer, just tons of announcements. So a lot of the headlines that are populating right now, I feel like are going to segue into hopefully some visuals of these things, so we know what the next year is going to shape up to be. The final story of the video is from GameSpot. The next Zelda will offer a new experience. Nintendo has no Tears of the Kingdom DLC plans. This is from Darren Bonthais, and I apologize if I butchered the name. The Legend of Zelda producer Eiji Aonuma and game director Hidemaru Fujibayashi have spoken about the future of the franchise and what the development team has planned for the next installment. Naturally, the pair aren't ready to divulge any details, but Fujibayashi did mention that a fun factor will be a core element in the next Zelda game. And Aonuma added that fans can look forward to a new experience when it eventually arrives. Aonuma added that there are currently no plans to release extra content for Tears of the Kingdom, which launched back in May for the Switch. The producer explained that this particular incarnation of Hyrule, an overhauled version of 2017's Breath of the Wild area, had been tapped dry and that the development team had put everything possible into the base game. Quote, "At this time, we are not planning to release additional content," Aonuma said to Famitsu via VGC. We feel like we have already fully explored and exhausted the gameplay possibilities in this world. Initially, the reason we decided to develop a sequel was because we believed there was still value in experiencing new gameplay within that particular Hyrule. If in the future we find a compelling reason, we may revisit that world once again. Whether it's another sequel or an entirely new title, I believe that the next game will offer a completely new experience. I hope you'll look forward to it. Now, I think this makes sense. I think that Breath of the Wild was such a big game, and Tears of the Kingdom is such a big game that you can literally experience that whole incarnation of Hyrule across both games for a long time. And to me, it only makes sense to refresh and do something new and exciting. What does that mean? Is it going to be a big title like these two games? Is it going to be something a little bit more scaled down? Is it going to come out sooner than later? Is it going to be on the next system? Is it going to be a launch title? Don't really know. So I think it makes sense to not have to worry about releasing DLC, because if you put everything into the kingdom already, what else can you draw from it? How else can you pull something from it that people are going to be excited about? In addition to that, if it's released on this current generation of Nintendo console, at what point do you have to shift gears to focus on the next generation? And if you're focusing on a DLC, that takes away from that development process. That takes away from that creativity and that experience that you can really drive towards something new and exciting and really refreshing. So to me, it makes sense. I mean, I'm not a huge Zelda player. I mean, I'm gonna be real. The last one I played was on NES. But at the same time, it is something that I appreciate, and I do have Breath of the Wild, and I have played it, so I am familiar with the gameplay, the experience, and that world, that universe. So I'd like to see something new. I'm always interested when they do new things. I don't think there's been anything yet that has just like grabbed me and said, yo, I've said I gotta play this. So hopefully that is something in the future. But I'm also willing to give Tears of the Kingdom a chance because I do like that universe. I like that immersion that the game offers. So we'll just have to wait and see. So those are the headlines for this video. I know it was a lot today. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, make sure you like and subscribe. Check out the website, bleepblooppod.com. Enjoy the podcasts that come out every Monday on all the podcast platforms so you can get that audio enjoyment. And like I always say, peace.